Tihe Moreora. Tēnā tātou e te whare, e tēnei whale Pasifika waiwaia. Nei raka tuku atu I ngā mihi ki ngā monga whakahi e tawharo nei a tātou. Ka mihi ki ngā aua whakatere tāniwha. E ngā tānata whenua o tēnei wahi, Ngāti whātua ki ora kei. Tēnei o ka mihi nui ki a koutou, e pupuri tonu ana I te mana motuhake o tēnei wahi tēnā koutou. Nō reira, e ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā karangatanga maha. Tēnā koutou kua tai mai nei ki te tōtoko I tēnei kopapa o te wā. E te minita Carmel Sepuloni, tēnā koe. Ka tuku I te reu pōwhiri ki a koutou katoa. Nō mai, haere mai, whakatō mai. Ka tuku I ngā mihi rangatira ki a koe, ahorangi Selina Tusitala Marsh. Kua eke koe ki ngā tomata o te matoranga. Huri noa I tō tātou whale. Tēnā koto, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora tātou, ko Robert Greenberg tōku ingoa, ko te manokura toi tangata ahau. I'm Robert Greenberg. I'm privileged to be the Dean of Arts, and I'm really delighted to give you warm Te Kura Tangata Faculty of Arts, Waipapato Mataro, University of Auckland greetings to this magnificent Whale Pasifika, which is hosting this amazing event to honor a new professor in our faculty and a very special event for all of us here to see Professor Selina Tusitala Marsh speak to us, perform with us, enjoy our company. Selina is not always conventional. We don't usually, that's an understatement, I suppose. We don't always start with the nibbles, but we are being really supportive and flexible. We like this, actually. We might start a new trend in the Faculty of Arts where we start with the nibbles and the drinks and the wine and the beer and everything else. And the bar, by the way, is closing at 7. Remember what we told you. And then we'll do the lecture or the performance, and this is by no means, I'm not even sure what to expect. I can sort of guess, but it's not a traditional lecture. It's what they now call at the university relational teaching, right? So we're going to do some relational work today. Selina is in a class of her own. She sort of hangs out with presidents, queens, prime ministers, and not surprisingly, we actually have a very special message today from the Prime Minister of our country, Prime Minister, the Honorable Jacinda Ardern, which I will read out to you. And it says, and I quote, "Dear Selina." Now, I'm not on the first name basis with Jacinda. We all tend to call her Jacinda, but dear Selina, it's already starting. It was lovely to hear from you. Thank you for thinking of me for this special occasion. I am sorry I cannot join you, but please accept my congratulations. Nonetheless, please also know that I continue to treasure the cloak, and I'm not sure what that is, Selina, so you'll have to explain, I hope, including my cloak of words. My very kindest regards and best wishes, Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister. So congratulations for the attention from Jacinda Ardern. We also are very privileged, as you would have heard from my mihi, to have Honorable Carmel Sepuloni here today with us. And we are also further privileged to know that she is going to say a few words before I introduce Selina to you. The Honorable Carmel Sepuloni is is of Samoan, Tongan, and New Zealand European descent. She's the MP for Kelston. She grew up and was raised and grew up in Waitara here in New Zealand, obviously, and has lived in Auckland since 1996. Outside of politics, she has worked in the health and education sectors. But we have a claim to fame here with Carmel. Those of you who have been here long enough, even longer than me, will know that she was our equity manager in the Faculty of Arts at the University of Auckland from 2008 and onwards. So we're really proud and want to welcome you home to Te Kura Tangata Faculty of Arts at the University, Carmel. In the Labour government in 2020, she was appointed as a Minister of Social Development and Employment, Minister for the ACC, Minister for Disability Issues, and probably most appropriately here tonight, the Minister for Arts and Cultural Heritage. One of Carmel's key priorities has to create a fair welfare system for all New Zealanders that upholds and respects everybody and everyone's dignity. Please welcome to the stage and to the podium here, the Honorable Carmel Sepuloni. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou, and thank you so much, Robert. It's good to see you again, and to be in your presence, and to be in the presence of this whale. I was just saying to a few people that it's been such a long time since I've visited here, but I fondly remember being part of this faculty when this whale was being built, and even on the day that we officially opened it, being one of the many soldiers supporting that opening. I think my role was to register the gifts that were given from those that were coming in, and so I do very much feel like this is home, and it's a privilege to be back here. And I've drank lots of wine in this whale as well, I have to say. It is a privilege to be here tonight to support Professor Selina, and I did not hesitate at the invitation or the opportunity to come along and acknowledge you, Selina, acknowledge you as one of our amazing Pacifica women leaders, not only in the arts, but in academia, and more broadly, I think, across our community. I'm very proud of you, like so many others are, including our Prime Minister. And tonight we really are here to celebrate you, Selina. I was reflecting on when I first met you, and it was when I was working here in the Faculty of Arts, and you were a fairly new lecturer in the English department with some very small boys who are no longer very small. And you automatically, and this is how it goes sometimes with our Pacifica and Māori academics, were nominated to be the equity coordinator for the English department. And it was so refreshing meeting you and getting to know you at that time. And what I remember was not only were you committed to your academic pursuits, to your art, but you were also just this amazing mother and family person who was committed to making sure that you struck that balance between your professional and creative pursuits with your role and responsibility that you also always valued as a mother. And now here you are with these amazing, very tall men who are your sons, that alongside all of that you've done in this academic world that you have raised over this period. So I want to acknowledge you as an academic, as a creative, and also as a mother. I was surprised, I will say this, to come and then learn that I think you're the only Pacific professor that we have at the University of Auckland at the moment. But what I'm excited about is that there are so many other talented Pacifica academic staff members here tonight, and perhaps unable to be here tonight, but working at this institution. And I know that pipeline of professors is a pipeline where we will see many more come through, I'm sure, looking at Tamasai Lau and others in the room. So I'm excited mostly to be here to celebrate you, but all that you represent, Selina, in terms of what we have been able to achieve as Pasifika people here in Aotearoa, what we have been able to achieve here at this wonderful institution, the University of Auckland, but also you represent what is possible for us moving forward, and we will continue to watch you and every other Pasifika person in this space to see that unfold in the years to come. Whawhai lava for having me along. Thank you, Selina. Thank you, Robert.
Alofa lava and whawhatai. Thank you, Carmel. It's great to have you back, and thank you for the inspiring words and your support of everything we do, and for your support of the arts and culture and all the things that really matter to many, many of us, in fact, in this room at the university. I now have the privilege of introducing briefly, because I know you're very impatiently waiting to hear from Professor Selina Tusitala Marsh, so I will briefly introduce her to you, and then we'll turn it over to Selina. At the end, I will please wait for me just to wrap up at the very, very end. But so Professor Selina Tusitala Marsh. She is the former Commonwealth poet and former New Zealand poet laureate, and she's an acclaimed writer, scholar, and performer. In 2019, she was made an Officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit for her services to poetry, literature, and the Pacific community. In 2020, she was inducted as a Fellow of the Royal Society of New Zealand. She has been lecturing in English, as was just said here, at the University of Auckland, and she teaches Pacific literature and creative writing, and I agree wholeheartedly with Carmel. She's one of many Pacifica professors that we will be celebrating at the university. Selina has performed her work for, as I said earlier, for primary schoolers, but presidents like Barack Obama. I'm really envious. He's one of my sort of heroes, I suppose. And for, my notes say here, for queers, but also for queens. So most notably, Her Royal Highness Queen Elizabeth II, who's so much on our minds these days during this period of mourning. She has published 3 critically acclaimed volumes: Fast Talking PI, Dark Sparring, and Tightrope in the last 7 or so years, or a little more than that. And her biographic work, Moped, from 2019, has been awarded the Margaret Mahy Supreme Book, won the Margaret Mahy Supreme Book in the New Zealand Book Awards in 2020, and the PANZ Best Book Design in 2020. Its sequel, Moped 2, The Queen's Poem, was shortlisted for a New Zealand Book Prize in 2021, and she just completed Moped Not Book 3. She's also working on an anthology of first-wave Pacifica poets from 16 Pacifica nations, and that's her current project. I'm looking forward to hearing much more about her work and hearing her perform, and I think you all are too, so that's enough for me, and I'm delighted, and please give her a very, very warm round of applause, Professor Selina Tusitala Marsh.
Thank you. Oh, I'm just going to grab that press. I don't feel bad about you guys standing at all, because if you're standing, I'm standing. We're all standing. Kia ora koutou, talofa lava, ma lo le soifua maua, ma le langi e mama. O loo ingoa o Selina Tusitala Marsh. Nā au whānau I nei Auckland. My family live here in Auckland. Wa o mātua e o mai Samoa, mā Tuvalu, mā Peretania, mā Wharani, mā Scotland. My parents come from Samoa, Tuvalu, Britain, France, Scotland. O loo tama o Simi Crosby e sau mai Auckland. My father was born in Auckland. O loo tina o Sailingi Tusitala e sau mai e Lisefau Apia, Samoa. My mother was born in a Lisefau Apia. O wa'o se whaiaunga mā Tusitala. I am a teacher and teller of tales. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I begin with two whakatauki that draw on the hand metaphor. He rau ringa e oti ai, many hands make light work. And many hands have gone into not only making my work light, but possible. There wouldn't be a led-by-line inaugural professorial lecture without the line of Lina, my mother. It's through her line and my grandfather, Vailei Tusitala, that I have the name Tusitala, which in Samoan means teller of tales. Nor would we be here tonight if not for the line of Jim, my dad. Now I know that doesn't roll off as poetically on the tongue as the line of Lina, but nevertheless, it remains true. Also to my friends, family, mentors, teachers, lecturers, writers, artists, and students aged 5 to 95, too many to name here, I thank you near and far, with us and beyond us. A special thank you to my sons, Javan, Micah, and Davey, who have crossed over with some other friends the waters from Waiheke to support their mum. You are hands down the best poems of my life. And a special thank you to Professor Helen Sword, who, along with my colleague Professor Michelle Leggett, we refer to her as the Professor Whisperer. The second whakatauki I want to share is he kai kei aku ringa. There is food at the end of your hands. This one refers to the ability to use the skills and resources you have at hand to create success. I was the first in my family to graduate from a university. I was raised by a single mother from the age of 8 who had that migrant dream of coming to New Zealand to make a better life. When Dad left, my older brother, Luka Fa'amanu, filled in that role of father for me and my younger sister Sam. He was 14. We grew up with the principle that you make do, and not with the martyr's mindset, but after my mother's flamboyant spirit. Our house in Avondale was rich with second-hand pink plastic flamingos in the hallway, Lieteg dusky maiden velvet paintings hung on the wall, glass boxed geisha dolls crammed on the mantelpiece. Visitors were greeted at the front door with Mum's prize frame poster from Motat, Lina Tusitala, wanted dead or alive. Mum was indeed an outlaw and lived by her own rules. As a family, we made do with what we had and spun it into gold. I also read this whakatauki figuratively. There is food at the end of my hands when I make do, when I make and do with exactly what is in them and on them. Led by line is a literary framing device I've devised that weaves together bloodlines, written lines, spoken lines, and drawn lines to decolonize, nourish, and beautify the spaces between storylines, body lines, and landlines. It's a way of reading and deeply appreciating Pacific literature in culturally centered ways. It also reflects my way of being. I draw on the lines on my hand to take you on an anti-linear exploration that focuses on how I survived and then thrived at this institution through my work as a Pacifica artist academic, work that has enabled me to stand in front of you here tonight. There is indeed food at the end of my hands. I marked my 49th birthday by receiving a tualima, the tattoo received by Samoan women on the back tua of their hand, lima. My hands are home to earth, sky, and sea. My skin wriggles with worms and centipedes, soars with seabirds, swims with fish, octopus, and jellyfish, and are speckled with stars, portals to the next life. Tā tātou, the customary form of Samoan tattooing, are created by puncturing the skin with a tiny comb lined with razor-sharp shark's teeth, and most recently, steel needles. These needles are dipped into a dye made from a special nut, or more recently, ink. The straight edge of the comb means that symbols are made by connecting thousands of tiny lines together. It always starts with a single line, an aso. The aso was defined by early Māori anthropologist, physician, and politician Te Rangihiroa as a single line of ink on the skin. Aso also refers to the ribbed coconut palm leaves that thatch roofs of Samoan whale. The iwi aso refers to the ribs within our own bodies. The aso is a frame for everything. When placed one after another or layered, these inked body lines form lines of connection to landlines and their natural inhabitants. Some of these lines of connection have been jeopardized, for many completely severed in our post-colonial era. The numerous founding isms of this era, imperialism, colonialism, capitalism, racism, sexism, genderism, to name a few, have exacerbated, if not been the direct cause of our current environmental crises. This connection between our body lines and our land lines have been detrimental to the health and well-being of our environment, inside and out. In many Indigenous societies, body lines and land lines are interrelational and interdependent. This common sense knowing eludes many Western modern-day societies, but it's something many of us yearn for. I certainly did when I began here as a student in 1989. I was one among a handful of PI die-hard lit fans, but most of my friends were gradually seduced by the usual suspects of law, education, and a home away from home for many, Pacific studies. So why did I stick at English? Apart from the fact that I love stories, I was told to. I've written elsewhere about how bossy my PhD supervisor and mentor, and now father, Mawalai Vau, Albert Went, was with me. He and Witi Ihamaira summoned me to his office in my final master's year and told me my grades were good enough for a PhD scholarship. I balked. I hadn't even seen this door before. I can't, I said. Albert's curt reply, those who knew Al through the 90s and noughties know what I mean, was, "Look behind you." I looked. I saw the door that I wanted to run through, and I turned back at him blank-faced. "Do you see a line?" he asked. "No," I replied. "You're the only one. We haven't kept a space for Māori and Pacific literature here for it to disappear when we retire." I looked to Witi for help. "Al's right," he said. "Good," Al nodded. "Close the door behind you." And that was my great commission. Go ye forth into the world and research the Pacific word. Struggle with doubt, fear, confusion in perpetuity. Commit thine hands to spreading the Pacific stories among our people. Toe the line, then find your own. Amene. Motif lines of my tātau can be read either as whole, interrelational and interdependent, or as separate and distinct. Each symbol on my tātau is an epistemological site. They are cultural portals for my knowing, doing, and being as a Pacific person in the Academy. My use of tātau in my work follows a line of inquiry laid down 26 years ago by Albert Wendt in his oft-cited essay, Tātauing the Post-Colonial Body, first published in 1996. Almost 4 decades after independence was won in the Pacific, beginning with Samoa in 1960, Wendt asked, how post-colonial is the interdisciplinary field of humanities in which a decolonizing agenda was purportedly embraced? He extended the definition of post in the term post-colonial to mean before, during, after, and alongside colonialism. Almost 3 decades later, I too wonder how post-colonial our lines are, and I'm not the only one. It's 2018. I've been made the Commonwealth Poet. I'm commissioned to write and perform a poem for Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II at Westminster Abbey for Commonwealth Observance Day. I've published on the experience in The Guardian and wrote a graphic memoir on it, Mophead 2, the Queen's poem, which we'll look at later. Here's a scene from when the Commonwealth guests and performers were invited to line up and meet the royal family afterwards. Here's a part of the real-life exchange. After the performance, the Queen admired the poem. How did you memorize that long poem? It's my job, Your Majesty. I'm a poet. Yes, I suppose it is. Well done. The Duke forgot the poem. So, what do you do? I'm a poet, Your Royal Highness. I just performed back there. What's not in the book is the next exchange I had with the Duke. Dissatisfied with my initial answer of, I'm a poet, the Duke pressed me again. Yes, but what do you do? To which I replied, I'm a lecturer at the University of Auckland in New Zealand, and I specialise in post-colonial literature. To which he replied before moving down the line, Post? Fabulous line, eh? The following year at Byron Bay Writers Festival, I shared a panel with Bundjalung Indigenous Australian writer Melissa Lukashenko. I shared this story. Melissa leaned into my mic and said, the old bugger's got it right for once. How might our lines enact the kinds of changes we need if we are to decolonise and care for the places and spaces within and around us? Moilua, 2 lines sleeping. If you draw 2 lines side by side on a piece of paper, how many lines are there? 2, 3, when you count the white line of space in the middle. My doctorate, I'm not a professor for nothing, right? My doctorate was about seeing the published yet invisible lines of first wave Pacific women poets. I identified how their lines defined the lines of others around them and how we make these seen, unseen spaces count. In 2004, I composed a poem in order to bring the lines of first wave Pacific women poets together, titled Led by Line. We are led by line, bloodline, love line, land line. The stitched line is a fine line when out of line with the colonial line. We are led by line, horizon line, body line, fault line, fisher line is out of line with the imperial line, the buried head in the sand line. We are led by line, lining up our spoken lines, broken lines of disintegrating harmonies, when we realign, laying it on the line by drawing our line in the sand. Led by line captures the collective, creative, personal and political lines written, stitched, spoken and drawn when breaking, bending and provoking colonial and post-colonial lines on, in and around Indigenous body lines and land lines. Now that's a line. And here's a cover. This book doesn't yet exist. Robert referred to this. I want to make the world's first graphic critical anthology on Pacific women poets, drawn by my line. I want it to be accessible to school students, and the whole thing will be written in verse, of course. The poem contains my lead by line praxis, which entails following and creating lines of connection in order to create spaces of change, transformation and renewal. I wanted so desperately to be a change agent for decolonization within the academy. And I just wanted to belong. At first, these seemed like two paradoxical aims, but in his essay, Went continues, and he exhorts Pacific writers and scholars not to be remade in the image of the institution, but to be more consciously ourselves. He argues that the post-colonial body ought to be one, quote, coming out of the Pacific, not a body being imposed on the Pacific, a blend in which influences from outside have been indigenized, absorbed in the image of the local and national, and in turn have altered the national and local. As an act of realigning my bloodlines and landlines with the humanities post-colonial line, I renamed and redefined myself as a Pacifica poet scholar. With the addition of my drawn lines in the Mophead series, I broadened this label to Pacifica artist academic. Variously defined, I identify with the definition of an artist academic as someone who is both an artist and academic, who not only uses art as research and education, but who also uses research and education to create art. Pacifica is a Samoan transliteration of the word Pacific, and there are other spellings from other island groups, but we all know who dominates, right? Right. Sorry, just a joke. I'm Tuvaluan as well, so it's like... It is commonly used to describe peoples of Pacific descent born and or raised here. I identify with and often find myself representing the Pacific as an imaginary homeland, in acts of what Gayatri Spivak calls strategic essentialism. There is no one Pacific, rather it comprises of 25,000 islands with distinct cultures and languages spread across the Earth's deepest and largest ocean. A strategically essential notion of the Pacific and its peoples as one identifiable entity is activated when I am the only PI in the room, offering the only PI perspective on an issue. My Samoan, Tuvaluan, diasporic bloodline connects with the entire fascia of the Pacific when visibility and voice are needed. I wrote a poem that both embraced the strategic essentialism and critiqued the risk of seeing all us PIs as the same. The poem was pivotal in helping me take my place and space at this university. I first performed it at the invitation of my colleague Michelle Leggett at a university poetry reading in 2004. Later, musician and colleague Tim Page, down the back there, said it stuck like a worm in his brain, and he composed a music loop in response. With my words and Tim's music, fast-talking PI was born and took on cult status in schools, catapulting me onto the public stage. I marvel at how prophetic some of it has become. It is 14 minutes in length, but I will read you the 2.5-minute version. Thanks, Tim. I'm a fast-talking PI. I'm a power-walking PI. I'm a demographic, hieroglyphic, fact sheet welding PI. I'm a theorizing PI. I'm a strategizing PI. I'm published in a peer-reviewed journal PI. I'm a slot machine PI. I'm a lotto queen PI. I'm a tote ticket church bingo TAB PI. I'm a vegan PI, a rainbow warrior PI. I'm a protest sign against the rising waters PI. I'm a criminal PI behind the bar graphs PI. I'm a gun smoking, patch toting king cobra PI. I'm a fale PI. I'm a marae PI. I'm a living, breathing dwelling of my ancestors PI. I'm a lazy PI. I'm a pea-crazy PI. I'm a hard-drinking, hard-speaking, where my ex-PI. I'm a land-based PI, a whanua PI. I'm a village is the center of my world PI. I'm a harvesting PI, a copra sacking PI. I'm a biting beef and reef cause no more fish PI. I'm a diabetic PI. I'm a heart disease PI. I'm a gout inflated, incubated case study PI. I'm a Siva Samoa PI. I'm an Ava pouring PI. I'm a Tula Fale tonguing genealogy PI. I'm an independent PI. I'm a flag raising PI. I'm a fa'a lovin' giving living PI. I'm a standing PI. I'm a beehive PI. I'm a Labour MP, gonna be PM one day PI. I'm an all-black PI. I'm an all-white PI. I'm a gold, silver, bronze, blue street signed PI. I'm an angry PI. I'm a dawn-raided PI. I'm a crouching Polly Panther in grey lin PI. I'm a propertied PI, a self-employed PI. I'm a mocha drinking, horn rim glasses, real TV PI. I'm a crumpin' PI, a go for God PI. I'm a colour-free gangster wannabe for the Lord PI. I'm a shark-toothed PI. I'm a tato PI. I'm a malu and a be'a flying fox let loose PI. I know how to be in this world. I know how to feed in its waters. I know how to read the stars and seabirds. I know how to live off poetry, and I know how to give it away. As for the word artist in Pacifica, artist, academic, until recently I was known mostly for my poetic line. As an academic, I've always included poetry in my scholarship. This isn't unusual for one teaching in the English department, but I also included my own poetry, which early in my career, one censorious senior colleague commented was, quote, self-indulgent. This, despite teaching his own work in his graduate courses. He's not here tonight, so don't worry, but by process of elimination, I could get in trouble. Okay. What he framed as vanity, I saw as a lifeline. My life, my lines, and my scholarship on people whose lines had been obscured and erased by Western imperial military, political, and ideological might. Pacific voices that fought to be heard. I needed to be self-reflexively grounded in my work and turned my poems into framing devices for scholarly argument and critical examination. A decade later, I ignored another well-meaning colleague who advised focusing on writing academic peer-reviewed articles instead of scribbling, quote unquote. I embarked on what became an award-winning graphic memoir series for all ages called Mophead. Now, the hyphen in artist academic has a dual function. Firstly, it symbolizes the Samoan principle of va. Wendt defines va as, quote, the space between, the betweenness, not empty space, not space that separates, but space that relates, that holds separate entities and things together in the unity that is all. A well-known Samoan expression is ia tuleva, cherish, nurse, care for the va, the relationships. This is crucial in communal cultures that value group, unity over individualism, who perceive the individual person, creature, things in terms of groups, in terms of va, in terms of relationships, end quote. Here, the black lines in the letters V and the peak echo the tracks of the navigational birds, the ngongo sina, or the tern, and the tuli, the plover, found throughout Samoan tattoo symbology. The line that is different and makes a difference, to echo Mophead's catch cry of how your difference makes a difference, is the red horizontal line that bridges. It turns and turns, T-E-R-N-S, bird footprints into letters of the alphabet. This visual depiction of the interrelational space between pictorial and semantic lines turn these lines into the word va. This red mythic bloodline forms the hyphen, the bridge, or the ala, the Samoan word for pathway. Note these are the final three letters in my name, Tusitala, connects the space between artist, academic. Vaituli, Pacific golden plover, the action of walking and coming together. Vaituli, the grey back turn or plover footprints. I invented a word the other day, as poets are wont to do. Well, it didn't come up on Google, so I'm claiming it. Epistemology. Say it with me. Epistemology, where epistemology, mythology, and methodology overlap. This is the idea behind a lead-by-line praxis, interweaving spoken and written and drawn lines with bloodline mythologies. Epistemology is a method outlining how we can center creative ways of knowing, doing, and being, episteme, so we can reason about and tell, logos, our stories, mythos, and restore the va within ourselves, among ourselves, and between ourselves and our places and spaces. Pacific epistemology can thus be a form of environmental activism. Ngongo sina, greyback tern, our navigational guide. Terns return. Following the flight of the tern, we recognize that the mythic past holds knowledge that can help us navigate the present. This does not mean foisting arcane myths onto our kids. It means restoring by restoring the timeless wisdoms held within myths and recognizing them as epistemological portals. We keep myths alive by passing them down through spoken, written, and drawn lives. Myths keep us alive by showing how to know, do, and be in this rapidly changing world. I want to share two examples. The Gal Marae and the Boy Who Remembered. In 2020, Barefoot Books in London commissioned me to write a myth from the Pacific region for a series of illustrated stories retold for a contemporary audience. The series addressed current environmental crises. Our global water crisis was the theme for this volume. Although vast, the Pacific is often represented by the golden triumvirate of Samoa, Tonga, and Fiji. Wanting to go beyond the usual suspects, I asked my Ni Vanuatu colleague, Dr. Pala Malisa, if he knew of any myths from his home of origin that had a connection with water. Pala recalled a childhood story about 5 brothers in a river. Pala spoke with his father, the late Sela Malisa. Sela recalled a tale from his father's village of Vanlav on Santo, as told to him by his father, Ripai Mande Tutuhun, Pala's grandfather. In this myth, there are 5 brothers, the names of whom are counted off on the storyteller's hand: Top, Tsitsi, Tekaumarai, Polisa, and Le. Sometimes a finger represents Majijiki, Vanlav's equivalent to Polynesia's archetypal rebellious hero, Maui. Majijiki holds the promise of transformation. In our story, he is cast as the boy who remembers a mythical creature's forgotten name. Many versions of this myth exist orally. They are passed through the body individually and collectively, living and breathing through each telling. Sela gave us his blessing to restory his recollection of the myth on paper. For the first time any of us knew, one version of this myth would be fixed in history and published. It's important that our version of the myth keep its storied bloodline of connection. It is simply one of many versions that exist orally. And given the degree of our creative restoring, this current iteration turned out to be a different tale altogether. Pala and I collaborated on a 5,000-word version of the myth. We were then given space for 500 words in its retelling. It needed to fit on a double-page spread complete with illustrations. The essential elements of the myth remained: a young boy, a river and its sacred guardian, an eel named Tekaumarai. The river's people are tasked with, and over time fail, at remembering all of the eel's sacred names. They become too busy with work, church, and industry to attend the seasonal rituals designed to cherish and care for the va inside and outside of themselves. The eel refuses to emerge from his hole without the name protocols being activated. The people forget how to honor the river. The river starts to die. This disconnect is exacerbated, if not created, by westernized living and modern-day capitalist demands. In the myth, time for ritual remembering is replaced by partaking in a cash economy, work in town, Western religiosity, church activities, and national industry, the cutting down of trees for export. The villagers neglect rituals designed to tuleva, and the long forgetting begins. The erosion of a collective memory results not only in the forgetting of the river guardians' names, but also of core human values that create connection and loss of emotional literacy. People no longer read the lines of their bodies, their own or that within the river. And we all know that names safeguard the origin stories of people, places, and events. Names provide time-honoured epistemological portals, stories embedded with knowledge of how to best nurture and care for the va. In return, the land takes care of people. In the myth, the core values connected to the eel's name come from the myth's place of origin, Vanlav, situated on the northwestern tip of Esperanto, where I was a week and a half ago after a 16-hour open sea boat ride on a fishing boat. Vanlav is not on Google Maps. Vanlav sits on the poet's ear. It sounds like Bob Marley's One Love, the Pacific's unofficial anthem. It sounds to me like fun, love. And fun and love are 2 of my own core values. Fun's the soul's portal for being present. You cannot belly laugh and be anywhere else but in the now. Love is the soul's portal for being present. You cannot love and be anywhere else but in the now. Or maybe, but that's another lecture. When the people come together to remember the eel's names, they have both fun and love, portals of connection. They take time out from the hustle and bustle to be present with each other, to remember the songs and be with the river. The eel speaks out, mirroring Majijiki's lines in metre and rhyme, reinforcing this interrelational, interdependent connection. The eel chants, people of fun and love, to always be free. No, you are the river. No, you are me. This wisdom is echoed in the Māori whakatauki, ko au te awa ko au. I am the river is me. Popularised after New Zealand's Whanganui River was awarded legal personhood in 2017, setting a legal precedence for the world. This myth was restored to reflect a simple truth. Look after the river and your environment and you'll live fed, connected and whole. But you can only look after the river if you are connected to yourself. You cannot connect to yourself if you don't remember who you come from and who you belong to. Petu, stars, ancestors. Like stars, we receive the light of our ancestors long after they've died. They are ever present in our stories. Alu alu, jellyfish, woman's strength. This tattoo symbol of the jellyfish belongs only to women. As explained by my tā tufunga Tyler Vaiao, the fringing tentacles of this particular jellyfish are beautiful to behold and soft to touch. But if you stand on one, you're dead. My second example of epistemology is mophead. Mophead is my unruly, tentacle-haired, self-drawn alter ego. She's the epitome of a diasporic Pasifika Afakasi girl power. Quite out of the box, and I just want to thank Sam Elworthy from AUP, if he's still here, for taking the chance on this out-of-the-box book. Mophead, as the Dean said, gatecrashed the New Zealand Children's Young Adult Fiction Book Awards. It gatecrashed the Best Book Design Awards, receiving a near-perfect score from 5 judges across the book sector. Interestingly to me, the judges commented, quote, "This magic book reaches past our brains and squeezes life into our hearts and imaginations. Mophead draws lines out to all the stories and histories that make up an individual, cultures, literature, family, and education." Mophead begins when I was 10 and teased at school for being a mophead and having wild Samoan tuvalu in hair. It follows my journey from being teased because of my difference to becoming the New Zealand Poet Laureate and having my difference celebrated. Each incoming laureate has a carved wooden staff, a toko that you see before me, crafted by Māori artist and architect Jacob Scott. As you can see, mine is sublime. Mine also looks like a mop. And that's when the narrative arc for Mophead was born. Mophead's hand-drawn red bloodlines interweaves the personal teasing with societal bullying that comes from racism and discrimination, one that foreshadows the impact of colonialism in its sequel, Mophead 2, the Queen's poem, which plays on the homonym tu and tu, tu, meaning stand in a number of Pacific languages. Embedded in the line are layers of other lines. Tu are the first 2 letters of Tusitala. The royal line of purple is used along with black as the sequel traces my dilemma of being made the Commonwealth poet and then tasked with composing and performing a poem for the Queen on behalf of the Commonwealth, countries all formerly colonised by the Crown. Can I stand up for my people who struggled against the Queen and still serve the Queen? I got out my journal. The answers were inside me. Mophead and I decide that the Westminster Abbey performance for the Queen offers an excellent opportunity to bring attention to London's colonial island's namesake, Ronthon and Kiribati, formerly the Gilbert Islands, and the rising sea levels suffered by Tuvalu, her grandfather's island, formerly the Ellis Islands. I needed to build a bridge from London's smoggy streets to the sinking sands in the South Seas. You'll wear Piglet. Piglet's holding up a banned CO2 sign. After I accepted the commission, I was informed of the Queen's 5 rules set and censored by the palace, each more difficult than the last. The poem had to be called Unity. The poem had to appeal to 9 to 94-year-olds as school children from across the UK primary schools would be gathered in the Westminster Abbey, and I think the Duke was the oldest person at the time at 94. The poem had to somehow include all 53 Commonwealth nations. The poem had to be less than 3 minutes long because BBC were filming it live. And I thought, it's worth stretching and contorting myself because I can raise the issue of global climate change and its impact on Grandfather's Island until they said that the 5th rule was the poem was not allowed to be political. The 5th and final rule is that the poem must not be political. Mini Mophead, that's how a country decides stuff. Are floating piglets political? The poem will be checked by the palace to make sure all the rules are followed. Moppy mayhem. Mophead gets stuck and suffers from writer's block until she connects the line. Then I stood in the middle of it and I saw the Allah. There's a you and an I in unity. She follows the poetic line back to her Pacific bloodline and its myths to implement the power of poetry. She draws upon Maui and Ngāwhenua and Nene Manoa to enrich the spaces between bloodlines, landlines, written, spoken and drawn lines. The palace didn't know that the poem is a trickster. You can't control it. Mahuika. Maui, you tricked me out of my last fiery fingernail. But Granny, I wanted to know where fire came from. Oh, you're going to know, all right. That the poem is a mirage. You can't believe what you see. Oh, what a fierce warrior he is. Oi, that's a she. It's Ngāwhenua, goddess of war. Each mythic figure is a cultural portal, deepening and reframing our connection with the world. Mophead also draws on the magic line of poetry and of words and writes the poem. I wrote the whole poem in a week, this is after 9 months, and sent it off to the palace. Unity, unity. Then it came back. Only one word was changed. Alliances, allegiances, colonial histories. Didn't need that word anyway. I'll work with it. Mophead and me break their rules and make our own, all while seemingly towing the line. Ilo, worm, DNA. Before I received my tattoo, I asked Samoa's former head of state and authority on Samoan pre-colonial religious beliefs and belief systems, Tuia Tuatupua Tamasese, to identify what he thought was the most significant tātau symbol. Tupua took my pencil and drew a single squiggly line in my journal. I waited for an explanation. Time went by. I got a Samoan creation myth, too long to recall here, but suffice it to say that one day the supreme god Tangaloa Lalangi threw down a vine from the heavens. When it landed on earth, it turned into worms. Some refer to these worms as our DNA because over time, the worms turned into humans. The reverse is also true. We are worms from earth. We are earth, as Went notes in his essay. Quote, our words for blood are toto, ele ele, and pala pala. Toto can also mean to plant. Ele ele and pala pala are also our terms for earth, soil, mud, dirt. We are therefore made of earth and soil. Our blood, which keeps us alive, is earth. So when you are tātauing the blood, the self, you are reconnecting it to the earth, reaffirming that you are earth, genetically and genealogically. The Samoan word for earth is ele ele. It also means blood. The Samoan word for land is whanua. It also means placenta. As a Pasifika artist academic, I too stand on the ala bridge between written, spoken and drawn lines to create a lead-by-line praxis in order to tule va, to cherish and care for the va, interrelational spaces between bloodlines and landlines through my epistemythological practice of restoring and restoring myths to address our current environmental crises. Now that's another line. That's also how I make and do to create colonial spaces, decolonial spaces. The most political position I can take in our current environment is to continue to gather these multiple lines together into my unique and singular self, in the belief that by doing so, others might too. To mark the Queen's passing, I want to finish with the poem I wrote for her titled Unity. Unity. Let's talk about unity. Here in London's Westminster Abbey, did you know there's a London in Kiribati, ocean island, South Pacific Sea? We're connected by currents of humanity, alliances, allegiances, colonial histories. The salt in the sea, like the salt in our blood, like the dust in our bones, our final return to mud means though 53 flags fly for our countries, they're stitched from the fabric of our unity. It's called the Va in Samoan philosophy. What you do affects me. What we do affects the land, sea, wildlife. Take the honeybee, nature's model of unity, pollinating from flower to seed. Bees thrive in hives, keeping their queen. And at this point, I look down at Her Majesty, and she looks up at me. Unity keeps them alive, keeps them buzzing. They're key to our fruit and veggie supplies, but parasitic attacks and pesticides threaten the bee, then you, then me. It's all connected. That's unity. My granddad's from Tuvalu. And to be specific, it's plop bang in the middle of the South Pacific, the smallest of our 53 Commonwealth nations, the largest in terms of reading vast constellations. My ancestors were guided by sky and sea trails, and way before Columbus even hoisted his sails. What we do now matters to those who go before. We face the future with our backs, sailing shore to shore, for we're earning and saving for a common wealth, a common strong body, a common good health. Means saving the ocean, means saving the bee, means London and the UK seeing Ronton in the South Seas and sharing our thoughts over a cup of tea. There's a you and an I in unity. Costs the earth, and yet it's free. Awhitai te le lava. Thank you for sharing this evening with me. Thank you.
Fafatai, thank you so very much. I'm unusually out of words myself. You and I, unity. I think what I will take away that is that this is one of the most unforgettable inaugurals I've ever had the privilege of hosting for the Faculty of Arts. And we are, as Carmel said earlier, so incredibly proud of this professor of ours, this artist academic, and I love that way that you framed your life, your journey, your ala. And I know that word now from my learning in Te Reo, ara. So it all resonated so strongly with me, and I'm sure it has left a really strong impact on all of us here today. I wanted to also just acknowledge how your reach, Professor Selina, your students, the school, schoolers, as were written in my notes, who are all here, sitting on the beanbags, all enjoying. This is a community that you brought together in this beautiful fale tonight. And it's just been a wonderful, amazing event that I think I will never, ever forget. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart on behalf of everyone here. And let's give one more rousing round of applause to Professor Selina.